In 1976, Zecharia Sitchin looked at ancient clay tablets and made a claim that still follows these symbols around. The Anunnaki were space travelers from a hidden planet called Nibiru, beings who came to Earth for gold and engineered humans to work for them. The claim sticks because it starts with real things: clay tablets, wedge-shaped marks, museum objects you can photograph, catalog, and translate. But the clay does not automatically tell that story. When standard cuneiform scholarship looks at these signs, the Anunnaki sit inside a Mesopotamian world of gods, lineage, labor, kingship, and cosmic order. Not by default, a space-age mining mission. So we follow the trail from artifact to translation to myth to the modern theory built on top of it. This is the Anunnaki tablets, what the cuneiform texts actually say. This is not a belief test, not for aliens, not for skepticism. The test is smaller and harder. What can the texts actually carry? So before a claim gets dramatic, we pin it down. There is the thing itself, a clay tablet, a cylinder seal, a word in cuneiform, a published translation, something we can point to. Then there is the reading, how scholars handle a sign in Sumerian or Akkadian. What kind of text holds it, and how the same word behaves across myths, hymns, king lists, and rituals. And then there is the leap, when a modern reader turns gods into astronauts, divine labor into mining operations, or a star symbol into a planet map. That does not solve every ancient mystery. It keeps each claim attached to the layer it came from. So the question is not, do you believe in aliens? The question is, who are the Anunnaki inside the world that wrote them down? And how, thousands of years later, did that world get translated into outer space? Before the word can be decoded, it has to be put back in the river cities that made it. That place sits between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, in the flat southern plain of what is now Iraq. Here, long before the Anunnaki became a modern internet mystery, cities like Uruk, Eridu, and Ur were learning how to organize thousands of people around canals, fields, temples, storehouses, and labor. This is the world we call Sumer. It was not one frozen civilization or one myth written once. It changed over centuries, and its stories moved through Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian scribal traditions. The reason the argument survives is clay. Scribes pressed wedge-shaped marks into wet tablets with a reed stylus. Some tablets tracked barley, workers, rations, and debts. Others recorded kings, offerings, hymns, rituals, omens, and stories about how the universe was ordered. So this is not one ancient book with one neat doctrine inside. It is an archive where administration, religion, power, and cosmology sit on the same shelves. That matters because Mesopotamian gods were woven into how cities explained authority, harvests, storms, illness, justice, death, and survival in a difficult landscape. A temple could be both religious center and economic institution. A myth about divine labor could also speak to human labor. A story about heaven and earth could legitimize kingship on the ground. The Anunnaki belong inside that layered world. In some texts, they appear as powerful deities. In others, they are associated with the great gods, judgment, the underworld, or the structure of the cosmos. Their role shifts with language, period, genre, and local tradition. Before asking whether a modern translation turned them into visitors from space, we have to do the smaller, harder thing. Look at the word itself. Anunnaki. Anunnaki. On screen, it can look solved. A strange ancient word, a dramatic translation, and then a leap beyond the tablet. But cuneiform does not work like a code ring. A sign has to be read, transliterated, compared with other uses, and placed back inside the sentence around it. Picture the source card on the table. Tablet detail, transliteration, standard lexicon, scholarly rendering. Each step narrows what the word can responsibly carry. In standard Sumerian reference works, including the kind of lexicon work represented by the Pennsylvania Sumerian Dictionary, Anunnaki is not read as astronauts, colonists, or genetic engineers. The term is usually connected to An, the high sky god, and to language of divine lineage, often rendered in the range of princely offspring, royal seed, or those of royal descent. That range matters. It is not one magic English equivalent. In Mesopotamian literature, the Anunnaki can be counted among the great gods. They can appear in cosmic settings. In some later Akkadian contexts, related divine groups are associated with judgment or the underworld. The shade changes with tablet, period, and genre. But the evidence stays inside Mesopotamian religion. What the word supports is a group of powerful deities tied to An and divine rank. What remains debated is which gods are meant, how many are included, and what role they play in a particular story. What the word itself does not supply is beings from another planet engineering humans in a laboratory. The ancient word is real. The divine beings are real within the texts. The space-age machinery has to be added later. That is where the trail turns toward 1976. On the timeline, the tablets are ancient. The alien version is modern. It comes into focus with Zecharia Sitchin's book, The 12th Planet, published after the moon landing, during the space age, when rockets, astronauts, and newly photographed planets had entered everyday imagination. Sitchin took names and motifs from Mesopotamian literature and arranged them into a single modern origin story. In that story, the Anunnaki were not gods within an ancient religious system. They were visitors from a planet he called Nibiru. They came to Earth, mined gold, and eventually engineered human beings to work for them. As storytelling, it works because it connects everything into one cinematic chain. Sky gods become space travelers, divine labor becomes industrial extraction, clay and blood creation myths become genetic engineering. A difficult ancient word becomes a clue in a cosmic detective story. Put those additions beside the tablets, and the gap appears. The ancient sources give us divine names, mythic scenes, temple worlds, kingship, labor, and creation language. Sitchin's theory adds a hidden planet, a gold mining mission, spacecraft, and biological engineering. Those additions are not sitting plainly in standard cuneiform translations. They are part of a modern interpretation, not a consensus reading produced by Assyriology. The theory often feels ancient because it uses ancient names: Anunnaki, Enki, Nibiru, Sumer, cuneiform. The names are ancient. The structure is 20th century. It speaks the language of the 1970s, planets as destinations, technology as explanation, ancient monuments as puzzles waiting for a lost machine-age key. From bookshelves to documentaries to message boards to short-form clips, the theory kept compressing until a complicated Mesopotamian divine world became one headline: Aliens Made Humans. The headline is simple. The tablets resist it. So the next move is to pull the strongest-looking piece of physical evidence onto the table and test it the same way: source, translation, context. The artifact people reach for again and again is a small cylinder seal now known as VA-243. VA-243 is the secondary stress test, not a tablet, but a real Mesopotamian cylinder seal, the kind rolled across wet clay to leave an image and an inscription. Near the top of its design is a symbol that can feel startlingly familiar, a larger central shape with smaller dots arranged around it. This is where the modern claim attaches itself to the object. In Sitchin's reading, that cluster becomes a diagram of the solar system, with the sun in the middle and a hidden extra planet among the bodies around it. As a visual argument, it is effective, because you do not need to read Sumerian to feel the resemblance. You just need circles around a center. But resemblance is only the first glance. If this were a solar system diagram, the first problem is structure. The dots are not arranged in orbital paths. They do not follow the known order of the planets. They do not show relative scale. There is no mathematical notation, no accompanying astronomical explanation, no inscription saying, in effect, here is a map of the planets. Mesopotamian art already had a language for the sky. Stars, divine symbols, and astral motifs appear across seals and boundary stones, often as signs of gods or heavenly powers, not as technical diagrams of planetary mechanics. In that mainstream contextual critique, a star-like symbol with surrounding marks does not need to be a literal solar system. It can be read more strongly as a star symbol inside a scene built from religious and administrative imagery. VA 243 teaches us something important, but not what the viral version claims. The object is real. The 12-planet reading is the modern layer being tested. And the contextual star symbol reading fits the artifact's world better than a technical map of planets. A real object can be forced to carry a claim it was never built to carry. If the seal does not give us alien astronomy, the trail goes back to the texts themselves, especially the creation stories, where the ancient world actually says why humans were made. Back in those texts, the story does not become ordinary. It gets stranger, in an older, more human way. One key source is the Atrahasis epic, preserved in Akkadian on clay tablets from ancient Mesopotamia. In this story, the problem is not a missing planet or secret technology. The problem is work. The gods are exhausted. The lower gods dig canals, maintain the ordered world, and carry the burden of labor until they rebel against the higher gods. The divine system is in crisis, not because humans have failed, but because humans do not yet exist. So the gods create a new kind of being to take on that burden. In the myth, humanity is made from clay, mixed with the blood of a slain god. Clay is the material of earth, riverbank, tablet, and the human body returning to dust. Divine blood gives the creature a connection to the gods, but not equality with them. The result is not humanity discovering a destiny among the stars. It is a workforce placed inside a cosmic hierarchy. That is the unsettling part of Atrahasis. It asks why humans suffer, farm, build, dig, serve, make offerings, and live under powers larger than themselves. Its answer is mythic. Humans were created so the gods no longer had to carry the labor of the world. You can see why a modern reader might translate this into genetic engineering. Clay becomes biological material. Divine blood becomes DNA. The gods become alien scientists. But those are modern categories laid over an ancient story. The text gives us ritual, hierarchy, rebellion, sacrifice, and the origin of human toil. It does not give us instruments, procedures, genes, spacecraft, or a technical account of engineering a species. Reducing it to a lab report actually makes the story smaller. Atrahasis is a myth about power. Who works? Who commands? Who pays the price when order has to be maintained? The creation story does not rescue the ancient astronaut claim. It shows a civilization using myth to explain labor, dependence, mortality, and the feeling that the world is arranged by forces beyond human control. That is where the stakes get bigger than one translation dispute. When we force these texts to say aliens, we may lose what they were actually saying about being human. That loss matters, because the alien shortcut does not just change one word on a tablet, it changes where the credit goes. On one side, the story becomes simple. Advanced beings arrive, teach humans, organize the world, and leave traces behind in clay. It is cinematic, easy to remember, and points ancient achievements away from the people who lived there. On the other side is something harder to explain and more impressive. People in southern Mesopotamia learned to manage rivers that could nourish a city one year and destroy fields the next. They built irrigation networks, stored grain, counted labor, recorded offerings, organized temples, negotiated power between kings and priests, and invented a writing system capable of tracking both sheep and gods. That is not a smaller story than aliens. It is a larger one. Cuneiform was not just mysterious symbols pressed into mud. It was infrastructure. It let a city remember debts, rations, land, law, ritual, and myth beyond the life of any one person. A scribe with a reed stylus belonged to the same world as the canal worker, the brewer, the priest, the farmer, and the king. When a modern theory skips the source, bends the translation, and removes the context, it does more than make a bad historical claim. It flattens a complex human world into a scavenger hunt for technology. Curiosity is not the problem. The best archaeology begins with questions. The problem starts when the answer is chosen before the tablet is read. That is why the three filters matter: source, translation, context. Is the object real? Does the word actually say what the claim needs it to say? Does the interpretation fit the world around it? Run the Anunnaki story through those filters, and the picture changes. The clay is still mysterious, the myths are still strange, but the credit moves back where the evidence places it, with ancient people trying to explain labor, power, death, the heavens, and their place inside an ordered world. Now we can separate what the tablets support from what modern imagination has added on top. The final board is not empty. It is not simple. There is evidence. The Anunnaki appear in Mesopotamian texts as gods, divine figures inside a world of temples, kingship, labor, judgment, and cosmic order. There is myth, stories like Atrahasis, where humans are shaped from clay and divine blood, so the burden of work can move from the gods to us. And there is speculation. The modern claim that these beings were extraterrestrial engineers from another planet, altering human DNA for a mining project. That claim is not what the tablets say. Removing the alien layer does not shrink the ancient story. It makes it more human and more haunting. The people who pressed these signs into clay lived between rivers that could feed them or drown them. Under skies they watched for omens, inside cities where labor, law, and worship were tied together. Their myths asked why humans suffer, why power exists, why work feels endless, and why the world seems ordered but never gentle. That is the mystery preserved here. Not a hidden space program, but an ancient attempt to place human life inside a cosmos that felt vast, demanding, and alive. Thousands of years later, modern readers looked at the same clay and built a new myth from it, one shaped by rockets, planets, genetics, and suspicion of authority. The tablets survived both worlds. They do not give us aliens. They give us something harder to explain. A record of how people, long before us, tried to understand what they were made for. To hear them clearly, the work is the same as it was at the beginning. Start with the source, read the translation, and keep the context close.